Okay, so we are expecting a few more people, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and people can join us in progress, because we've got a lot of content that we want to get through today. So thank you very much for joining today's LMA session on Service Metamorphosis 2.0. For those of you who joined 1.0, that makes sense. For anyone who wasn't with us last time, you're sort of going, what's the 2 for? Brenda and Tara will explain all. We are going to take around 75 minutes for the session. We're going to be starting with a presentation. During that, your microphones will be muted, just for everybody's comfort. We do ask if you can turn your camera on. That would be great, unless you're somewhere where it's very distracting to do so, because it's much better for Brenda and Tara to see everybody's faces. Once we go into the breakout rooms, you'll be put into one of 2 breakout rooms. You were able to choose these when you registered. Some people didn't specify a preference, so we have allocated a room to you. You'll be in the breakout sessions, and it's totally fully interactive, so please do pipe up, and then we'll all come back and we'll learn what the other breakout session got up to as well, before wrapping up at around 3:15 for those in the east, and adjust for your own time zones as applicable. So I'm going to hand over now to Brenda Plowman and Tara Little, who'll introduce themselves. Ladies, over to you.
Thank you. So we are so glad to be with you today, and it certainly is my pleasure as a Canadian, but I know it is also a great pleasure. We have at least 2 Americans on with us. Tara, who's been my partner on delivery for Service Metamorphosis, and we will introduce in a moment. And Morgan, I saw you as well, so I'm so thrilled that you're with us. I don't know if I missed anyone else, but I noticed those 2 names. So it's a real pleasure to kick off this session, and don't worry if you weren't on 1.0, 2.0 is independent and builds off of everything that we already did. So if we just look at, we'll introduce Tara and I in just a moment, so we'll go to the next slide. Tara and I, okay, there we go. So the next big thing program is a program that is sponsored by the International Legal Marketing Association, and it is now in its 5th year. And so I'll talk a little bit about how it began. It began as a collaboration with the International Board and the Hall of Fame members. And the first year it was AI. The second year, the focus was on law firm structures. And then in the 3rd year, Deborah McMurray from Content Pilot and myself were asked to lead this program. So we focused on service metamorphosis, and that was year 3. And then in year 4, we were asked to double down again because there's so much content. So that was the genesis of the program. And now in year 5, it will be change management, and that started to kick off. And so hopefully you'll get a chance to actually take a look at that program as well. So just a little bit about Tara and myself. I'll kick it off and then I'll pass it over. So if you don't know who I am the CMO for Fasken, and I have just gone into my 15th year at Fasken, which I can't believe. I went to Fasken for a year, which is crazy, and I started out in a different role. So I've been in a few roles, and I love my firm. I'm super proud of my firm. I have an amazing team, and there's a number of you on this call today. And we've built an incredible brand. And the other thing that I am very, very excited about is I am the president-elect for the International Board for 2022. So I'm the incoming president, and really thrilled to do that role as a Canadian. Tara?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Tara Liddell. I serve as Chief Marketing Officer for Finnegan, Henderson, Faribault, Garrett, and Dunner. And we don't have a Canadian office, so you guys may not be as familiar with the firm, but we are an intellectual property law only. So it's a fun blend between marketing and developing business for a niche practice. So we don't have the battles between practice areas and in groups and so forth. We really can hone in our effort on just IP, but we do operate at the scale of the size of some GP firms. You know, we have 10 offices worldwide. Our headquarters is in Washington, D.C., and that's where I'm around, the D.C. area. And like Brenda, when I look back on my time, it's amazing to think that I am entering my 19th year at Finnegan and have had many different roles as well, all within the area of marketing and business development. But now serving as CMO, this will be my 5th year. So a lot of exciting things, and always keeping me energized and engaged, which is really interesting to think about for a law firm, you know, over that time. And then much like Brenda, I have found a lot of value in being engaged with the Legal Marketing Association, and it's my honor to serve as president-elect for the Mid-Atlantic region for this year, and then president for next year for the region. So looking forward to being able to work closely with Brenda moving forward on those areas and help continue to serve our community.
It's been a lot of fun. We were joking around at the beginning. Well, I had commented on how much my hair has grown. Tara, I just actually noticed how much yours has grown. So we have a lot of parallels, our careers, our LMA, our hair, and we've been hanging out together with this, and then we get to do that for a while longer. So a really great relationship, and I've learned a lot from Tara, and I'm really excited about what we'll learn from all of you today. And so we'll press on. We will keep reminding you about your cameras. We have found, Tara and I, when we do these presentations, when you have your cameras on and you engage with us, the session is better. And like I just said, we're learning from you and you're learning from us. And so that's really the intention. So learning outcomes. You know, as we sat down in the summer, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, we really wanted to think about how do we make this different from what it was in 1.0. And that really was the 4 stages of metamorphosis. So all of us in 2020 operated at some level of triage, and we had a lot of discussions about that. And then what did we need to do as we moved into 2021, and now we're in that 2021. And already, if you think about your January, it's been insane. So how do you take time, now we're in February, and slow it down and keep focused on service? As we put the program together, Deborah and I, we looked for some inspiration in the world, and we really focused on some disruptors that we had identified through McKinsey. And so we're going to talk about those and how we think you can bring them into your firm, regardless of the role that you're playing or your organization, working with law firms. The law firm assessment, we're going to send that out at the end. I really am going to encourage you to take a look at that. I'm going to tell you about my own journey with that, because I've been on a service transformation journey at Fasken. And so at the end, we'll punctuate with that, and that'll be a part of what you'll get at the very end as the materials come out. And then take a look at your service approaches overall as you think through today, and look to make small changes. It doesn't have to be big. Just make sure you're making those changes and being an advocate for service in your firm. So, you know, when we really sat back to think through this whole idea of service and how could we do that, it was awkward. We were right in the middle of the pandemic. We were trying to think through, we launched our recording, and we were trying to think about how do we do this for people and how do we even get on their radars. And so really what we came to was we needed to get back to the basics in a way that we could deliver in this new world that we were operating to build a sustainable model. That was our focus. And so in many ways, service is harder. And, you know, I think about the conversations that I have with lawyers every day when they can't identify a way that they can be in touch with people and see them in a casual way when they're meeting with them, or, you know, just sharing a coffee, a glass of wine, doing something like that. And so in many ways, it's more difficult because we're not able to do that today because of the pandemic. And then in some ways, we're a lot more personal with people, and there's an opportunity to get to know them a little bit better. So we were joking at the beginning of this session that, you know, you could well hear my dogs or Tara's dog, dogs, or you could hear her children or her construction. And you're in my house, and you've probably never been in my house before, many of you. And I'm welcoming you in just like you're welcoming us into yours. And so there's an opportunity there to really make personal, meaningful conversation and sort of change how things are. And to give you a real live example about that, the other night I met up with one of our lawyers who's often somebody I go for drinks with when I'm in Toronto. And so for the first time, I found out she had a dog. I found out things about her kids. And so that ability to really connect with her was different. And I consider her somebody that I get an opportunity to connect with on a regular basis, but suddenly that changed and went to a new level. So really, we've got to figure out how to drive service in a simplified way and make sure that we're able to elevate beyond the pandemic. And I'm still hearing, clients are still trying to focus how to operate, they're still under pressure, they're not thinking about new things. And I wonder if that's true. And I think part of our roles in marketing and business development is really to help bring forward this notion of service is really more important now than ever.
So if you did join us for 1.0 at all, now 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, you will know or remember that Brenda and Deborah do a fantastic job when building the presentation and sort of thinking through this process, grounding it in understanding what our true clients are saying, what the general counsels are saying, as part of the relationship we maintain. So, when you look back at some of the interviews and commentary that Brenda and Deborah were able to get, which was the beginning of 2020, and then carried through as the pandemic started, it's not all that surprising. And I think a lot of it now, as we're, in February of 2021, feels very much like common sense to all of us, but it was the unknown when we thought about, March of last year, April, May. But they were coming to the conclusion that you don't need, in-person meetings to get work done, effectively. And that was a big surprise, I think, for many, which it shouldn't have been, really. I mean, we all work in tech savvy environments, we're not just working on paper anymore. But with the legal profession, we know that there's a bit of a slower trend on adopting, new ideas, such as connecting via Zoom. So I remember we did not have Zoom accounts at our firm as of March last year. By June, we got them, but you just think like, wow, it's unreal to think we wouldn't have had that. Moving forward, remote work will still be a significant component. I mean, I think for the time being, we felt that, the pandemic might be a shorter time frame, and that's continued to extend longer, throughout the world than anyone initially anticipated. But of course, hopefully the light at the end of the tunnel with that, once that goes away, we will still probably be adopting and have adopted a new remote work lifestyle that we just really didn't anticipate a year ago. So meeting much more frequently on video for conferences as well, which, to Brenda's point, so many of our attorneys, come to us not only with the day-to-day of, how do I stay connected with my clients, but when you think about the new relationships, so much of that is harbored in the act of going to a conference and shaking hands or saying hello to people that you would have never met before in another scenario or setting. So how do we help our attorneys navigate through building those relationships when they're not teed up in the same way that, they were through in person? Much less face-to-face entertainment. I think our community has actually adapted quite well to that. It is a different environment and experience when you can get on a Zoom with, 8 people and go through a virtual wine tasting or go through sort of more of a book club type of experience and have those conversations than it was to go to, a concert or a sporting event, or some other type of, entertainment. I think the dinners are still something that many people miss, but I've found a lot of hope and positivity in how quickly our teams, pivoted across the legal marketing community for offering those entertainment opportunities virtually. Expenses will be greatly reduced. We're seeing news about that every day right now as numbers start to come in for, the AmLaw rankings and so forth. And so just really understanding how we can offer that service, but know that we'll probably be challenged with expenses, moving forward. And we can't just go right back to what we used to spend. That'll probably be no more for a while. And then there will be competition for large clients. And so this is something where, you know, we see these types of headlines year after year, day in and day out. But these were some of the ones from last year. You know, Honeywell Legal Boss went beyond big cut 100 down to 13. Preferred providers, you know, it's not easy to cut, but it's necessary. In-house concern, they're spending too much on outside counsel. And unfortunately, with some of these AmLaw reports now coming out on the profits going way up for firms, I think we're going to see a lot more of that as well, because there's always that very critical perspective on, well, wait, why are you making so much as a firm? And we all suffered through, you know, an economic and market hardship. So seeing how that pans out over the next few months. But, you know, overall, we're still seeing the same demands and requirements from our in-house counsel, general counsel, which is they demand transparency. They want to understand the billing and expenses behind everything. And you know, the good news is that most are satisfied and they want to continue those relationships, but it doesn't mean they're not going to be critical of not only the intellectual service we're providing, but the entire client experience and the service all of us participate in.
And Tara, I think there has been, you know, there's been actually a lot of business, and there's a lot of reports that talk about how much growth there could be in this year. And you know, a lot of what is in the marketplace talks about the incumbents having a position, right? That's a solid position because people have been through so much change.
Yes.
So, you know, when we did that research, I just think it's important now to sort of point to it in a way as we've come into 2021, and you're the only group we're going to deliver this to in 2020. But as I think back to that, that was that point of view that was coming at that time. I think what a lot of us on this call know is that 2020 ended up being a crazy busy year in law firms. And so this service concept, as the incumbents have been successful with the work, becomes even more important. And that's sort of where you're going to go next.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think also what you were saying, Brenda, in terms of that incumbent relationship, it's the first relationship. It's always been the easier relationship to sort of showcase the service, grow the relationship. But when you look back over the year and the coming year, it's oftentimes going to be maybe our only for certain attorney relationships in our firm, because again, they may be completely hindered in terms of how do they make a new relationship, you know, and so forth. So, you know, this focus on, you know, client service in the era that we're working on and working in right now is really important. And it's going to take, you know, measurable, tangible, recognizable impact and a focus on superior service. And again, both last year from a slightly different perspective and heading into 2021, it is more critical than ever. You know, you want to be part of that opportunity and the growth in the marketplace that we hope to see, you know, and is being predicted for the year. And the one thing that I really, you know, took away when Brenda and I first started talking through this, and I was honored to be part of 1.0 as well. So just thinking back to, you know, the process of what service metamorphosis looks like. Thinking about it in those small focused steps that everybody, you know, all of us have a role in client service in one way or another. And some may have multiple small roles, which make it feel like a larger role. But it's all critical. And that was the same when we were thinking in 1.0 and just trying to figure out what those steps were and the process was, you know, for firms in terms of implementing client service. So we want to empower and actually hear from you today in our breakout sessions on thinking about what you can do, you know, in your role or with your colleagues at the firm. And there's Snowflake behind me, sorry. So you'll get to see her jump up and down. But just really thinking about what your own role is and how you can encourage others to adopt this mindset as well. All right. So this one, I always feel like I would like to get up and actually shake, because what I like to say is, you know, we need to shift and shake ourselves loose from the fatigue to to Brenda's point, we've been operating in this triage fatigue all along. I also like to say, because we're all on Zoom, we've all experienced Zoom fatigue, but I'm attached to headphones today, so I'm not going to get up and shift and shake. If you guys want to, please feel free. But really adopting that physical mindset of movement into what you're going to do with a new, fresh look. And actually presenting in the beginning of 2021 really helped me think through that a little bit differently than some of the other presentations Brenda and I were making towards the end of the year, which, you know, you just physically have such a different mindset when you're wrapping something up versus, okay, I'm kicking off a new year fresh and what can I do differently? So with this one, I would just say, you know, we've tried to think outside the box as we've talked through this, and certainly in the disruptors that we're going to talk, you know, share with you and take a deeper dive into 2 of the disruptors. But, you know, continue to, we have societal disruptions and distractions, and it's still continuing right now. But step outside of that, look at what you're doing, and then pivot and think creatively about that. And that's where I think we will see a lot of opportunity for change and implementing small steps to success for our client service. Brenda, do you want to talk through the disruptors?
Yeah, so providing exceptional service in small steps. So for me, it was monumental when we started to think through this and think, how could we get ourselves out of this triage state we were all in? So the first thing that we did as Deborah and I came together is we reached out to other people and said, do you feel like how are you operating? And they all kind of came back in their own version of triage. So it wasn't just what we were experiencing. And, you know, small steps are small steps, but they're harder to see in the environment we're in because of all those factors that Tara is talking about. So we were so thankful to McKinsey when we came across this notion of disruptors at a sustainable speed, and we picked 5 of them. And so we're going to focus on those 5 today. I'm going to talk about them from the perspective of if you're the leader in your organization, and I'm going to talk about them from the perspective of if you're a member of the team in your organization in a minute. But the whole idea here really was, how do we help people break free from that daily inbox, everything's coming in, and really to shift into something where you could make change happen, because change is hard. I just want to make sure that we also recognize that what we're talking about when we're talking about service isn't just service to our external clients. So we did that survey, we looked at those, we asked those questions of our clients that were external to our firms or organizations, but it's also the people within your organizations and how you're providing service to them or firms. So I know there's people who provide services to firms and people in firms, but when you think about each other and how you're interacting with each other, that's a big part of service as well. So we really want to think about, you know, a small step would be ongoing, meaningful connection. So what I shared with you about that lawyer, that's an ongoing, meaningful connection that, you know, I took the time and I asked a question the other day and then they gave me some insight. So they're small things, they're not big things necessarily. So these 5 disruptors, we're going to focus on 2 in our breakouts. I'm going to give you some more detail. So speed up and delegate decision-making, step up your execution excellence, which will be one of our breakout groups, flatten the structure of your team, unleash nimble, empowered pop-up teams, which I'm super passionate about, and learn how to learn. So we're going to get into each of these now, and then we'll get into our breakout. So we're trucking along pretty good here. Okay, so for speed up and delegate decision making, I'm not going to go into each of them, but I am going to focus on particular areas. And we had a team of about 10 people who worked with us, and Jill Weber, who's one of the former presidents of LMA International, back in the day when we delivered 1.0, we talked about how do we make this applicable to everybody in the organization. So for me, this whole notion of speed up and delegate decision making is, how do I motivate the teams that work for me? How do I help them want to be faster, deliver greater value? So it's the thing that I focus on there for leaders. Slow decisions can paralyze and are usually not the best decisions either, especially in our legal environments. For a team member, speeding up and delegating decision-making is thinking through what you've been asked to do and really thinking about how you provide value. So it's never, that's not my job, that's a different role, that's a different department, that's somebody else who does that job. It's really thinking about bringing ideas forward and showing your firm, your leader, your organization where you can do more. So it's bringing that level of thinking forward to help speed up and delegate decision-making. So there's a role for both leaders and team members. The second pandemic-inspired disruptor is Step Up Execution Excellence, and Tara's going to lead this session today. But some of the most important aspects here for me have been discussing and defining what excellence is and why it's important. So if you're a team lead and you actually take the time to talk about excellence and why it is we're targeting something, it's helpful for people. If you tell them the why we're doing something, it's also helpful. And if you celebrate, and most of us know this if we're leading, but it's something that we should remember, if we're celebrating excellence and really giving recognition to progress along a path, it makes people feel good and want to continue towards execution excellence. If you're a member of a team, really, if you see an opportunity to simplify what you're doing and deliver something in a more excellent way, that's really what we're going to encourage you to do here. That simplification. So think about what you hear in the marketplace around efficiency. And I think what I hear sometimes is, it's not my job. What I'd say to you is, it is your job, and you need to look to find value in everything that you do and to show that you're trying to make a difference, and show that to your managers or your leaders, and have them understand, help them understand what it is you're trying to do in terms of executing with the spirit of excellence. So the flatten the structure, we're not going to talk about this in the breakout, but I think it's a really good one. I love the yellow bubble. So kill the beast of bureaucracy is really the focus here. So how do you flatten the structure? And, you know, I know that this is hard. I'm working on this with our own team, and we're trying to look at the ways that things become bureaucratic and inefficient. So the idea for a leader is really thinking about, how do you redesign your team for maximum productivity, responsiveness, and service? So that's really what you're trying to get to the bottom of when you flatten your structure and have a real thoughtful conversation with yourself or with other people that you might be working with. For team members, and this is hard, and I think it's hard even for managers and leaders, but I'd encourage us to listen to this, is to question the hierarchy and question when delivering something doesn't make sense. I think the other thing is to make sure you're offering your services. So when you see something that's happening in the firm and you put up your hand, or your organization, and you say, I want to contribute here. So I'm seeing, Kate, that the sound cut out for you. Is everybody else okay? Okay, looks like people are good. So Kate, you might want to join back in, and we're recording this, so this will also be available to you. So hopefully you'll be able to get that. Okay, I'm seeing generally everybody's okay. So back up to this one. When we're thinking about flattening the structure, one of the ways that helps is when you put up your hand and you offer to contribute on something. I know that that's a bit of a big ask for people, and your boss might say, well, thanks very much, but that's not what I really had in mind for you. What I think it still does is it shows that you're open to wanting to contribute more. And the way you get to contribute more is you help to identify that. So you need sometimes to let people know what you're capable of and also what interests you. Because once they know that, then they're able to really take it to a different level. I've been working on a really cool initiative in my own firm. And as I meet with a couple of people that I've been working on that initiative with, they bring me more. And what it's done for me as a leader is it's made me want to have more of those conversations, because actually the thinking's getting bigger with each of the conversations that I'm having. But how that's happening is people are showing me more. So hopefully that makes sense to you, because what it's doing for me is it's building my excitement, my trust, my understanding of people's capability. And as they bring more, we do more, because we're working together and we're flattening the structure. And nobody has all the ideas. So unleashing nimble pop-up teams, empowered pop-up teams. So this one's a fascinating one for me, because before we found the McKinsey article and these disruptors, I had started to do this in my firm, but we call them SWAT teams. And so my team members that are on this call will know that we have started to do this, and I am so passionate about it, and we have learned so much, and it hasn't all been successful. So the idea is to take people from members of teams, might not even be in your own department or area, and collaborate with people in other areas to actually solve a problem. Bring those departments together and find a way to find the best solution, not the way we've always done it. So the other thing is, as leaders, you need to get out of the way. And I will, when we talk about this on our breakout session, I'll talk to you a little bit about what I've learned in getting out of the way and some of the things that are really critical in terms of helping people be successful. For team members, what it means is you're given a slate to figure out the best way to do the work, not the way you've always done the work. So this really is encouraging people to be very entrepreneurial and make sure you're achieving the objective. You know, what I learned from a team just before the holidays is the objective wasn't clearly stated. So it was harder for us to actually figure out how to be successful in our pop-up team or our SWAT team. So there's a lot of things, but when you tell people what the goal is and you give them the opportunity to actually solve for that, it's amazing what you can do if you bring cross-functional teams together. And this last one may seem simple, learn how to learn, but I'd say it's probably one of the hardest pieces. So how do you develop leadership with your team members? I think this is really hard right now. How do you develop critical thinking, i.e. don't just take what's given to you, don't be an order taker, figure out how it is that you act critically, question what you're being asked to do in a positive way, employ the right emotional intelligence. And for team members, I think you should develop your subject matter expertise, but you should challenge yourself to learn and read something and really be growing all the time. I'm actually doing this as a mandate of mine. I'm reading something almost every day of the week, even if it's something about work or something unrelated. And I think the other thing is LMA is such a good source for this, so that everybody on this call can really help you come together and learn something if you actually lean into this network. So we really think that providing service inside your organization or externally is the differentiator. It is proven as a differentiator in all kinds of industries. And actually, there's a lot of really good data that suggests that service, when done well, drives revenue in law firms. So the facts are there, and you can look around, you can ask where I look. I'm happy to share those things with you. But what it means is you have to build this notion of loyalty with your clients, whether those are internal clients or external clients. So how do you do that? How do you build deeper trust with clients in a time that is still considered to be uncertain? Maybe not grave, maybe we need to change that now, maybe we have adapted. But we believe that service can be the differentiator in how we provide our services within our organizations or firms and how we provide it externally.
Sorry, trying to get to the unmute button, which in a small laptop screen is a little more difficult to do. So I was saying we're going to move on to talking about service as the differentiator and what role we can all play. And so Brenda mentioned the 5 disruptors, and we're anxious to get into the breakout rooms, to talk about 2 of those disruptors. But before that, we wanted to highlight an idea that really took hold in the 80s. So maybe some people on this call weren't even around when the idea took hold. But it supports a lot of the basis of, the creative thinking and adapting as we're moving on and adapting to new environments. And the topic is intrapreneuring. So this is the throwback to the 80s for everybody, just to remember all the fun things. And intrapreneuring. And so if you don't know what intrapreneuring is, I will walk through, what our definition that we're using, and it's, broad definition, but certainly applies. And the reason we think it's important to have this as we head into the breakout conversations is to really think of yourself as an intrapreneur. So intrapreneurs are internal employees who use entrepreneurial skills and thinking to seek out initiatives that can benefit the organization. They are workers, dreamers, innovators, and drivers of change. And they aren't just idea generators, although that's a key aspect to their personality. They are prepared to help do the work to drive the change. And it really it's successful when you're finding other entrepreneurs as well. And so as Brenda was mentioning, whether that's across the firm, whether it's across your own team, really working with the people who are thinking outside the box, thinking in those big picture future, scenarios, but also willing to do the work, think through an implementation or a process that might change, and then help build the coalition for the change. So again, service can be an external thing, but we also really want everybody to walk away today empowered for how they will internally, start to change service within their firm. So how to be a killer entrepreneur. This is really, again, speaking to any team member, no matter the size or scale of your firm, and no matter the level of operation that you're working at right now. We want team members to develop an entrepreneurial spirit and continue to expand their entrepreneurial spirit, learn new actions that can improve and really move the needle of service at your firm. And when you're starting to take those smaller slices of perspective, that's where you can start to see that needle shift. And then, you just sort of keep building upon it. Take a step back and look at, oh, this is the movement we've seen overall. But you don't want to start big and say, great, we're gonna overhaul, whether it's, your billing department, and the service that's applied through that and the outreach about it. You're not going to overhaul everything and see the needle move very far when it's such a big ask. So thinking in that smaller stepped process of, we went to e-billing and all the bills got out on time, those smaller increments. Take initiative to be more productive and innovative. And when you're working with teams that are outside of your day-to-day routine, it's an opportunity to learn. So you don't have to come to the table being innovative. You can listen and learn, and then as the process evolves, be innovative and be a core, contributor to that. And ensure the freshness dates of your skill sets are current. This can easily be forgotten along the way. All of us, we just sort of dive into whatever project we're working on and we don't necessarily think of our day-to-day learning and sort of the maintenance of keeping those skills up. There's probably a lot of resources, not only internally at your own firms, whether it's, different IT training or again, learning from your colleagues who are maybe doing functions outside of what you do on a day-to-day basis. But then I always like to put a little plug in for the body of knowledge that LMA offers. It never fails that whenever I take sort of my annual review of the BOK, I find something new that I think, oh, I need to focus on this. And I haven't really, retooled my effectiveness at, whatever task that may be. And I can just say, personally speaking, we're talking a lot about this at the firm right now because we're recognizing, having moved into, a virtual environment for now almost a full year, that we overlooked the basic training of certain programs for all roles across the firm. So, being able to use Word effectively, based on somebody's role in a firm, they might not have been relying on Microsoft Word and formatting things and so forth. So really taking a step back and understanding what trainings should we make available? How do we offer those trainings? How do we encourage participation so that people are learning along the way? And then being confident. And if you aren't, figuring out why and taking the time to do that. And I think the, number 4 and 5 really correlate directly with each other. The more that you have an opportunity to learn and at a pace that makes sense for you, the more confident that you're going to be as you walk into, these opportunities of service and working with others. So we are going to head into our breakout discussions now. And as Brenda mentioned and Catherine mentioned early on, today the 2 group conversations will focus on stepping up execution excellence and unleashing nimble, empowered pop-up teams. So for those of you in execution excellence, you'll get to see me. And then for those in empowered pop-up teams, you'll get to see Brenda. And we'll have hopefully screens on and a really dynamic conversation between everyone in the room.
So we're going to just, before we go into those rooms, a couple of things that I'll go over. So if you think about entrepreneurship, and we're really doing well on time, exactly where we want to be, and so we can get the feedback from you as well. If you think about entrepreneurship, if we actually go back, Tara, what we're looking for, your entrepreneurship is, if we go back again, your mindset to be able to delve into those 5 disruptors, right? So that's why we think it's a worthy idea, because it means you stepping out from wherever you are to be willing to contribute. So if we go to the breakouts, what will happen is we'd like to have a scribe for each of the breakouts that we do. Your role is perfect for, you can go to the next slide, Tara. Your role is absolutely perfect for contributing to this. Don't think, well, I'm not the leader of my team, or I only play this role, or Brenda's my boss, because some of you are on here. It doesn't matter. And so what we want to do is make sure we're bringing that thinking forward. So we're going to make a list of all the actions that you can take, and then we will share them back. So if we go to the next slide. So really the question is, what actions can each of you take in the next 60 days from the breakouts? But we'll just talk about them a little bit more. So I think now we're ready to go to our breakout rooms. We've got less than 15 minutes to go. So I think I'll hop right in, Tara, if you're ready. Yep. We won't go to assessment yet. If we just stick on the disruptors, she's really getting ahead of herself. Sarah, it's okay, she's zippy today. I'm going to ask Sarah to report on our Unleash Nimble pop-up teams, empowered pop-up teams, and Empowered Matters, because it came up.
Hi, everyone. So our group talked about, we started off trying to figure out who was really in the group. In general, we had mostly law firms and 1 external service provider. There were no solo marketers, so we had half of the team with 5 or less, and then half of the team with more than 5 marketers at their respective firms. And we really discussed different pop-up teams that everyone had experience with at their firms. Trying to come up with ideas as a pop-up team, or trying to find something that's not easily solvable on your own, where you really need other people to help out. Some of them were overcoming technical difficulties, where you have to have 3 different portions of, or groups of people coming together to come up with one product, of whether it's, I need someone from billing and CRM and business development. Or it could be a situation where a couple of us have done pop-up teams with client groups, where you're bringing in different members of different practice groups to talk about a specific client. Maybe that client needs different service areas, or you can grow the client in a service area. or you're not maybe effectively communicating with that client as much as you would like to. And so bringing those client groups together to have a discussion on a regular basis is something that would be very important, of course. What we spoke about and what Brenda shared was being able to break free from the areas you're in and getting out of that thought process of not thinking that that's not what I do, or being a bit shy to really speak out because it's not something that you're probably doing for your day-to-day job, but you may have knowledge about it. So giving your pop-up teams the ability to say, you know, it's okay if this isn't something that you're doing day-to-day, but please share with us, because everyone's ideas are important, of course. We also discussed challenges with the pop-up teams, most of them being that the pop-up teams are not formal. And so a lot of the teams might, in some instances, put it to, oh, I'll deal with that later because it's not a top priority, because it's not a formal group or not a formal team with a formal report that I have to worry about. And so based on those discussions, we discussed having some sort of formal reporting where it's, you know, you're checking in on a regular basis, or you're making sure that there's a checkpoint where you chat with your team to see how they're doing, to make sure that they're getting through it, or if they're failing through it, like Brenda said. So really having that check-in, even though it's not a formal group, formalizes it in a sense so that you can move forward, and the group isn't seen as sort of, you know, Z on your list of A to Z of things that you have to do, because, you know, face it, we're all busy with a lot of other things that we're doing. And then we also talked about making sure that we're setting timelines for the pop-up group, so that it's, you know, this pop-up group is specific for a year or for 6 months, and after 6 months it's over. So it's not something that turns into a pop-up group that stays forever and ever. But just coming up with those different ways that you can do that, definitely something that that our group really bounced off one another, and it was great to have different people's perspectives and experiences in their different pop-up groups and the ways that they worked with them.
Wow, what an amazing scribe, Sarah. Thank you. Amazing. Tara?
So this time I actually did remember to ask for a scribe. So Susan graciously volunteered. And so Susan, do you want to jump in and talk through? We really tried to cover sort of we were able to get through three sort of larger topics in our conversation.
Tara, you're going to fill in the gaps where I might have any, so please chime in. And high five to my friend Sarah in Alberta. So great to see you, my former board friend, Sarah. We had a discussion around, Tara started us off talking about how do we empower and motivate leaders. And we took this from the perspective of both if you're in a leadership position yourself or if you're a teammate. And some of the comments that we received in our group was articulating the vision is really important. And one of the quotes that one of our team members called out was the quote that was, I think, in the presentation, create value for clients you don't want to live without, and how that's such an important statement in this context. So articulating the vision so others can rally behind it, and with a recognition that articulating the vision can also be the challenge, right? Like, how do we actually frame that in a way that is motivating and compelling? But it's a valuable exercise in launching this idea of creating or motivating leaders. And then Tara chimed in with, you know, explaining the why. And I think we can all relate to that with our lawyers. If we're trying to motivate our lawyers to do something, if they understand why we're asking them and how it connects to everything else that we're doing as a firm or as a team, it's easier to get them to participate. And also another member said, being not to be afraid to question the why, that the why itself may need some clarification. So don't just blindly, I think Brenda talked about, don't just blindly go ahead, really understand and get behind what you're doing and understand the why. Because if you understand the why, this is me editorializing, then you can get greater support. What else did we get? Involving lawyers directly. Yes, absolutely. Getting the lawyers buy-in, and that creates more energy. And I think we've all probably seen that to great extent lately. And as a leader, how do we, as a leader or again, a teammate, this was another question that was posed, how do we outline the why? How do we empower leadership? Don't be afraid to ask about the why. And another group member on our team said, tie it into your strategic plan, which we all went, ooh, somebody has a strategic plan. Get their buy-in with the plan. So that goes back to the why. So this was kind of the real theme of understanding the why. I think Tara in our group, correct me if you saw it differently.
No, I agree.
Yeah, the why was really important. We're working with a highly intelligent intellectual environment. I think that's so important. I talked a little bit about the KPIs, the key performance indicators in your strategic plan. So the measurables and how important it is to show success in moving that strategic plan forward, because we all want to back a winner. And if people understand that the strategic plan, to the greatest extent possible, is actually moving the needle forward, who doesn't want to get on board with that? And similarly, talking about piloting projects. And we talked a little bit about, and Brenda, we hearkened back to your comment on the SWAT teams and how they're not always successful. And I think that's really, really important. As a community, we talk about things that we've tried and that we're not always successful. And that's where innovation is born, right? Trying things. And if we try 10 things in a firm and only 4 are successful, then hopefully we haven't over-resourced the other 6 that were not successful, but we've moved forward with 4. But if we try nothing, we're paralyzed and we're just treading water. And by treading water, we're actually moving behind. And that it's okay to fail. And Tara asked me to really underscore the whole notion of having courage to actually try things, have courage to have those conversations, and step into areas where you think you are feeling courageous. Do your research, do your due diligence, but bring courage to what you're doing so that you can innovate and move the needle forward. Tara, that was a bit disjointed, but did I cover it all?
Well, you worked through all of my notes as well, Susan, so I agree. Thank you. The other last point I just wanted to make that I thought was, and we heard after we were talking through, the idea of courage and keeping that top of mind, but was, bringing your honest, authentic self.
Yes.
This was really sort of circling around how do we motivate teams, and I just thought that was another important, idea to keep in mind.
And it's the notion of building a culture that makes it safe to bring your authentic self and to show courage and to try things that might actually fail, and that's generally okay, provided that certain parameters are in place.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. It was a really great discussion. And so thank you.
Just to add one comment there, we talked a little bit about the SWAT teams, and I don't think it's the notion of complete failure or not. And I talked in our breakout session about this, and I think it really drills down on this idea of fail forward, because I worked with a team and they struggled a little bit and we learned a lot from it. This was just before the holidays. And I remember saying to them, I am so glad you struggled. Look at all your growth. And I think they felt better. So, I think it's just embracing that it's not meant to be perfect, right? If we're trying our best, if we're learning and evolving from it, and I think we evolved a lot, then we're on the right path. I know we don't have much time left, Tara.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and, between my Zoom video screen and then there we go. I just got to make sure my cursor's on the right screen. So we did want to let everybody know, and I think Brenda mentioned this at the top of the program, we will be providing, following today's program, a copy of the slides, the recording, but in addition, what we're calling a Service Metamorphosis 2.0 assessment. And again, those of you who may have seen 1.0 in one way, shape, or form would have seen that we offered a tool in context of that as well. And so with the 2.0 assessment, and I actually want to give Brenda just a minute or two to talk about her personal experience walking through it. But we highly encourage you to do the self-assessment. It's enlightening in a lot of different ways and formats. But it also, I think, helps you really focus in on an area of service that you can, coming out of today, think about for the next 60 days that you want to start, a project with, or change maybe the mode of the service that's happening at this point in time. So, Brenda, do you want to add to your own personal experience?
Yeah, so I just I want to show you mine. And so it's as simple as I've prepared for this, because we did this and we've been on our own transformation with service exercise through our firm. So I remember when I kicked off in Vancouver, Susan, the day of my first baby alpaca being born. That was Service 1.0, which is crazy to now. You know, we used my firm and kind of what we were going through along the path and sort of looking at it. And so our assessment, I think it's good to look at. I mean, we now have, you know, our service standards. And at that point in time, one of the questions that we asked people to ask is your CMO involved in setting service standards? Do you know? You should have a conversation with them. And we encouraged you, if you weren't a CMO, to go back and speak to the head of your department and find out. And at that point in time, we were sort of embarking on our own journey. It actually looks at whether you're doing audits, how you're getting feedback, and why I think it's so important that as we came into 2.0, I took the assessment. And so even though I've been seeping in service for 2+ years, we still have a distance to go. And so it doesn't matter where you're at on the curve. It just matters that you look at the assessment and you think about what it is that you can contribute in your firm or your organization and bring it forward. So use the 2-pager, think about it, judge yourself fairly. Yeah, we're doing it. No, we're not. We're partway there. I have no idea. I'm going to ask that question, but it'll help you actually in how you bring this into your firm.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was a great example of being, you know, quite realistic. To your point, you probably more than any one of us have been at a forefront of this, thinking about it, Brenda. Yet you're still able to, you know, realistically look at, you know, maybe how much further you have to go in, you know, across the firm or in a specific area. So I think it tees up the final question, you know, quite well, which is, you know, what is your role in ensuring that service is a success in your firm? And we try to, you know, harp on it probably, you know, maybe a little bit, or speak to it, you know, as many times as we could in this presentation, which is, this really is for everybody. You know, it is small steps, and it is you being confident and finding a voice in either changing what is happening right now with service, or bridging the gap and actually approaching the concept of service, you know, in your firm. So we hope that you can have something to take away and are empowered to do so. And I personally really appreciate being able to meet all of you today and being a part of your day.
So if you have questions, please, you know, feel free to write to us. I think our information's on the next slide. We are happy to answer them, and we really appreciate you guys being here. And we finished with a little bit, 2 minutes over, so sorry about that.